The Redefined podcast is part of the Windmate Give podcast network.
You know, I had never been to Alaska up until last summer. My family and I took a Disney cruise to Alaska. If you ever want to see Alaska the right way, I think you need to hop on a cruise ship because Alaska is friggin' huge. First of all, everywhere we went, it felt like a totally different place. And outside of the National Geographic channel and the magazines I saw as a kid, I didn't know much about Alaska besides it was real pretty. And of course, the aesthetic of Alaska is beautiful, but somebody I know from Alaska is also beautiful. She is dynamic and smart and vibrant. And the leader of her crew, Ed, your husband, I'm sorry, he's dead to me. Ed, forget him. I'm Team Dar Walden, everybody. Dar, our guest today. Welcome to the Redefined podcast. How are you, Dar?
Great. And thanks for having me, Eric.
Absolutely. We tried to schedule a week or two ago and you were busy. Wouldn't you know, an entrepreneur is busy in real estate. You've been doing real estate how long now, Dar?
23 years.
Holy geez. Okay.
23 years, yeah.
Okay. So started when you were 19. Perfect.
I wish.
Yeah, there it
I had
is.
13 years prior to that with an international marketing company.
Oh, what did that look like?
Well, you know, Ed and I lived overseas for 15 years. We lived 5 years in Japan and 10 years in Germany.
Wow.
Before we moved to Alaska. And I managed, when we were in Europe, in Germany, I managed all the European areas where I didn't work for the military, but I contracted with the military. And anywhere there was an installation or an embassy, all the way from Italy, Amsterdam area, Cairo, Egypt, any of those places, I would travel to Spain, all of them down there. Any place there was a military installation is where I would end up going. And so when I moved to Alaska, I actually stepped down, and a couple of months later, the company called me and they're like, we need you to come back.
Oh.
And I'm like, I don't want to come back, and I can't handle Europe from Alaska. And they're like, no, we need you in the Far East. And so I ended up going back for a couple of years and traveling to the Far East, which consisted of Alaska, Washington, Montana, Idaho, Okinawa, Japan, mainland Japan, Korea, Guam, and Hawaii Islands. And I was
gang, I don't know if you're good with maps, but Washington State and Idaho to Korea, that's not close at all.
No, but that's how it was divided up. So I did a lot of traveling, about 150 days a year on the road, and we had 2 6th graders and a junior in high school. So finally, after a couple of years of that, I just said, I can't do this anymore. It's just too much. Got out of it and got into the real estate, and here I am 23 years later.
Why'd you settle on Alaska? What was the draw there? Is that where you're from, or is it because it's flipping Alaska?
No, I'm originally I grew up in California, Northern California. And I mean,
what part?
Country California.
Okay.
Like
wine
Chico.
Country, California, or like hillbilly California?
No, like cow country.
Okay.
California. Up by Chico. I mean, pretty much everybody's heard of the University of Chico. And so I grew up there. But the reason Alaska was, Ed is retired military. He had 20 years in the military, and it was
the Army.
Air Force.
Air Force. Okay. I have a lot of good friends that are Air Force, and they're like, that's the branch you want to choose, right? It's the nicer hotels instead of the barracks. It's
a little sweeter on you than the Army and the Marines and the Navy. I have a son right now that is a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and he teaches at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. So he kind of followed Dad's footsteps a little bit.
I've been there, actually. It's a beautiful, beautiful location.
Yeah, they really like, he'll actually retire. He's about 3 years out from retiring. Okay. So anyway, but anyway, we were 20 years military. This was our last duty station, and we had a choice between, we'd been overseas for 15 years, so we could pretty much choose where we wanted to go. And we knew we definitely didn't want to go back to California. So Ed came to me and he's like, do you want to go to Hawaii or do you want to go to Alaska? And Hawaii we had lived in Japan, Okinawa, which is an island that's 14 miles wide and 70 miles long. And I said,
Mhm.
I'm not doing another island. I don't want to do another island. Like I thought I was accomplishing something by coming to Alaska, but Alaska's like an island, right? Like you
Right.
can't go anywhere unless you fly or you have to drive for days on ends.
Mhm.
So we kind of ended up on the island of Alaska.
I had never been to Asia. We just got back from a trip to Thailand,
Oh,
traveling through Seoul. I was shocked at how Americanized South Korea was. Like
mhm.
that airport, it's like I was walking through a high-end mall.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
And
wild.
English is their second language. Just about every country you go in, English is the second language.
Yeah, how cocky are we as Americans to be like everybody just follow us and go figure. Uh, so obviously 15 years of living overseas and living in Alaska, 150 days on the road. What are some lessons and not even on the road, like literally in the air?
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn at that time, Dark? Because I think I right here I'm a fanboy of Dar Walden. First of all, I want to be clear on that. And I traveled 122 days last year. Now, some of that was soccer travel with my family and
Right.
vacations, but I probably had 80 or 90 work days.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I loved it.
You
I
know,
liked it and I hated it, but I don't know if I
yeah,
loved it. What
you know,
what what would you say to a dummy like me who's traveling around that much?
everybody thinks it's glamorous, and it really isn't. Like when I go, I would go to work,
Yeah.
and when everybody go, oh man, you get to go to Hawaii. Like, yeah, I'm in a hotel from about 8:30 at night, and I get up at 6 in the morning. I work out and I go to work. So
Yeah.
there's not it really wasn't fun. I think the biggest.
The aesthetic in the Uber to and from your hotel is the ambiance that you get to see, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were some places like Korea, when I would go, I'd go down in the evening sometimes and walk around and shop or whatever. But for the most part, it was just work. And I would go back to my hotel room and do computer work. So, but that's me. And I'm probably not the average. I'm very driven and dedicated to
Yeah.
things, probably more than I should be sometimes. The lessons I learned was I really hate flying.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't know what a flight was. It was under an 8, 9, 10 hours long. When I would go to Guam, it would take me 27 hours to get there. So,
uh,
it was just, and I would go usually for typically about 20 to 25 days at a time. I would be
oh, so
gone.
that's an extended trip. That's not an in and out.
Well, I would typically fly over and go to multiple locations, so I didn't have to keep flying back and
Sure.
forth.
So
Um,
you would go to Guam, to Japan, to
Mainland,
Hawaii, to
yeah,
like you'd bounce around.
yeah, I'd bounce
Okay.
around. Um,
But this is travel alone, right?
mhm.
I think
Yeah,
I
that was
think one of the loneliest places on earth, Dar, is a hotel room on day number 8 away from your family. Like it is, there is no continental breakfast in the world waiting for you at that Hilton. That's gonna warm your feelings, right?
I know. And then I'd call home, and that was really like what made me decide. I worked in the corporate world, right? And I didn't love the corporate world because there's so much politics in it. And, it seemed like I'd work with these principals of these companies and they go to Korea or meet me there or whatever. And then the next time it would be a different person. And those people, the guy before me had just been fired, and it
Mhm.
was just like, to me, there was so little loyalty in the corporate world that I didn't want to work for somebody else. And I knew that. Um, I think, the travel piece being my biggest lesson that after a while, it just really plays a toll on you. And I would call home, and my kids would tell me, we're having dad fixed us pizza and corn and turkey. And I'm like, what kind of dinner is that? Like, I mean, seriously, my kids are eating this food that my Ed is no cook, okay? He called me once, I think I was in Korea, and he's like, Dar, I'm like, I've been boiling hot dogs for dinner, but it's been like an hour and a half. And I'm like, what kind of pot? He'd had them in like one of these giant stock pots, and he had like 3 hot dogs in there boiling for the kids. And I'm like,
In 10 gallons of water.
water, so it
You
was
can
things
just
like
microwave that bad boy for 30 seconds and you're good.
that. And so it was that. And then probably one of the big deciding factors for me was we had a very old dog. He was 14 years old and he'd been all over with us. And he died when I was in Korea. It seemed like everything happened in Korea. And Christopher, my son, was so distraught and I couldn't be there. I really couldn't be there. And so that honestly was probably the piece that sent me over the edge as a mother. I'm never going to be that mother that stays at home and I tried that when my kids were little. I tried to when we lived in Japan. I said, you know what? I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to be a beaver cleaver mother. I'm going to have chocolate chip cookies and milk ready when they come home from school. And about 3 months into it, my 7-year-old son pulled Ed into the bathroom and said, Dad, can I talk to you? And he said, sure, son, what's up? And he goes, do you think you could find mom a job? She was so much nicer when she worked because I was cleaning. All I did was clean all day long. And then they
Yep.
come home and mess things up. So that was my ticket for the rest of my life to be a working mother because
Wow.
my son volleyed that I went back to work. He was volleying with his dad to get me
Oh
a
my
job.
gosh. If we stopped our conversation right now, the episode title is Dar Walden Horrible at Home, right? Like it's gonna be really great.
I tried so hard and I was very miserable. I just have too much of a energy level to be at home. And my kids would I walked around with a Clorox bottle in my hand, sterilizing everything, and I was just, they were like, yeah, mom needs to go back to work.
Yeah. Dar, in the moment, did you feel successful when you were on the road and living this corporate life? And looking back, do you view that as like great times, or do you look back with maybe a little chip on your shoulder?
No chip on my shoulder. I'm not that chip on my shoulder type of person. I think, um, I think more I look back and I think, what does success look like? Did I feel successful? I guess to some point I did, but I don't really look at myself. I mean, you and I email back and forth. I don't really see myself as that wildly successful person. I just do my job. I do my job and I try to do what's expected of me. So
What
I
you
think
expect of you, or what other people expect of you?
probably a little both. I
Okay.
think, I'm
What do you expect of you, Dar?
um success. What does success mean? Okay, here we go. We're gonna go in this circle.
Yeah.
How many different ways can you ask the same question, right? Um, I expect myself to walk the walk. If I say I'm going to do something, I
Yeah.
do it. I follow through with it. Which is why I was so mad I missed our call that day because I don't do that. Very rarely do I do things like that. And I think just being in general a good person that does their work, works hard. And sometimes working hard isn't always being successful either though. You
Mhm.
work smart, not hard. And
Yeah.
and I've learned a lot about that over the time. And I mean, I look back from where I developed to this little country girl that, my husband swept me away and took me overseas and how I've developed business wise that way. Um, I think I don't know, Eric. I don't know that how I define success within myself.
Mm. Uh, are are you proud of you?
Yeah, I mean, proud is a big word, Eric. That's
I
like
know it
arrogance
is.
to me. Being, I just am.
Be like acknowledging the growth you've had and the things you've done and the impact you've made and the risks you've taken and the difference you've made in this world. You can be proud of that. Being prideful means that like you're the best and you think that nobody else can hold a candle to you. I mean that's the comparison I do.
Yeah.
Like looking back on what you've done, 15 years professionally, traveling around the world, now 23 years in real estate. Are you proud of you, Dar?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I always think that uh, I always think you can be better.
Yeah.
And, I just think that I never want to be, I always want to be humble.
Mm.
I think humble is a big thing. And so many people are, I just was looking at a magazine today and it has all these agents locally in it and stuff. And I look at it and I just shake my head, and they've asked me like 3 times to be in it, and I just can't get myself to do it.
Hmm.
So I think, yes, am I proud of what we've accomplished? Yes, we've accomplished a lot. Being in the military 20 years and starting my career, I wanted to be a doctor. I actually wanted to be a dentist, is what I wanted to be. And I started dental school, and then
You
we
just
moved.
wanted Fridays off, right?
So that's your dentist too, huh? And so I had to give up my career that I wanted to do for my husband's career. And so for 20 years, I basically followed him around, and I had to figure out what to do, with my life, knowing that I wasn't a stay-at-home mother. And, there was times when we first moved to Germany, I bagged groceries at a grocery store for tips only.
Hmm.
And so I've always said, I'll never forget where I've come from, no matter how good I get or no matter where I'm at in life, is that I just won't allow myself to forget that we all breathe the same air, and we are all
Hmm.
I we're in my opinion, we're equal.
Hmm.
And everybody has their little thing they like to do, but I just have never wanted to lose touch with being humble.
Maybe not now, but at the time, did you ever resent having to go wherever Ed was deployed to?
No, it was the next adventure in our life all the time.
Really?
We
Okay.
we actually chose to stay overseas. We didn't have to stay overseas. We went home. We were living in Japan. We went home for Christmas, and the whole family was fighting over us, like, because the kids were little, and
Yeah.
we got on the plane to come home, and we looked at each other, and he goes, "That wasn't really all that much fun." And I was like, "No, I agree." He goes, "You want to do another stint overseas?" And we're like, "Well, where?" He goes, "Let's go to Europe." And I'm like, "Good, let's do this."
Yeah.
So to me, being overseas, following Ed's career, I mean, did it hinder potentially maybe uh, the route that I took? Then would it be different if we didn't? I'm sure it would be. But I think everything happens for a reason in your life, and that was our reason. And we had a great time living overseas.
Hmm.
At 15 years, we came back because we had a 17-year-old that was getting ready to graduate and go to college, and 2 sixth graders, and they had never lived in the United States. Our 17-year-old was 3 years old when we left. And so we needed to get them integrated back into American life.
Yeah. Yeah. I have two thoughts, and then I want to move on just a hair. The first is you talked about kind of this balance of appreciating where you've come from, but you also are still focusing on where you can go and that there's room. Have you read the book, The Gap and the Gain?
I have not.
Yeah, it is. It was my favorite read of 2022, and talks about how most of us live in kind of a frustrating state because we're paying attention to the gain that we're still, or excuse me, we're paying attention to the gap between who we want to be, who we think we ought to be, what success really looks like, and the chasm that exists between the two.
Mhm.
But they challenge and say you actually need to pay attention to the gain and see how far you've come, because the number one thing that leads to happiness and joy in life is the feeling of progression.
Yep.
And so that for me was a really great book at an important part of my life. I also heard you say a couple of times you talked about being humble. And I don't know what humility means to you. I'd love to understand that.
As I said earlier, to me, it's like, don't forget where you came from
Yeah.
and the grounds that you grew up in and the life that you lived. And, sometimes, especially in the real estate industry, people make it big and they forget who they were. They forget they're so involved in telling everybody who they are. They forget who they were and for what they stand for, and the morals and the ethics and those kind of things sometimes get crossed with success.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's what that means, is don't cross the two.
Mm.
Respect both sides of the card, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I heard an undertone there, Dar, of a unique perspective, right? You want to keep perspective on where you've come from, the gifts that you've been given, the help that you've been surrounded with, and the family and the friends that have embraced you. You have a unique perspective. in the world. And we're going to continue to talk about that. I just want to share with you what humble means to me is it doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It just means thinking of yourself less. And I think that that's very much in line with how you seem to operate and how you tend to care for your family, how you tend to care for your team. And in that, let's take the perspective. I want to try to bottle up what we've said so far. The perspective of being a military wife, the perspective of having 3 kids that lived internationally for so long, the perspective of having a business that had you work around the world 150 days a year, and now 23 years in a real estate business. You have a unique worldview and a unique perspective, Dar. And you took with your husband a big risk a few years ago in terms of doing what very few people have risked and done. And that was the buying of another business and merging 2 businesses into one, not even in the same city, in the same state, but this state is bigger than any other state, like 7-fold. So what happened years ago when you chose to buy another business? What perspective have you gained? What lessons have you learned? Would you do it all over again? Are you an idiot or a hero? I have so many questions.
Well, so that actually wasn't the first business that we bought. The first business we bought was um, it was my real estate business, but it wasn't called the Walden team years back.
That would be odd if you bought somebody else's team than the Walden team.
Very good point. So that was how I got started in real estate. Was actually I was fortunate enough, and I mean I do know how it happened, but it was just a fluke. That I mentored under the #1 agent in the state for 25 years. And everybody used to come and go, how did you manage this? I'm like, I don't know. I went and saw one of her houses. We started talking, and then I asked her about the real estate world, and she called me and said, are you interested in this? And I said, yes. And so then we met, talked, and they wanted to set themselves up for retirement. So the Walden team developed after we purchased their book of business that they had. And that was a lot of money coming out of the military, making, pennies. And
because most people don't in our industry of real estate, we don't really have sellable businesses now. The tide has changed. Can I ask what you had to buy her book of business for?
It was about $750,000.
That's substantial. And what year was this?
2000 or 2001. I don't remember.
That's like $2 million today, Dar.
Yeah.
Please don't pull out an inflation calculator and tell me I'm wrong. But I think money and everything has shifted about that much, but it's at least doubled in the last 23 years.
And we worked underneath them for so I worked 3-4 years, I think, and then Ed retired. He was still active duty here in Alaska. And then he retired, and he hadn't really planned to get out quite as early as he did, but we needed him badly in the real estate side. We were just like slammed. And so he ended up getting out. It made more sense financially for him to get out and retire at 20 years and stay in a couple extra years until the kids graduated. It really we mentored under them a total. I did 7 years, and then finally they retired. It was rough. It was hard the last year or two. We definitely had some rocky roads with them, and the most thankful words in that whole transaction of the first purchase was they set us down. And we were the first team in Alaska. There were 4 of us. It was husband and wife and Ed and I. And they set us down one day and they said, we're really concerned. We don't think you're going to make it in the business. Game on, baby.
So you needed somebody to tell you and bet against you.
And while it didn't feel good at the time, and we were really, really like mortified by it, we were like, be dang, we're going to succeed. And we did. We like lived on wheels by wheels for the first 3 years we were in this business, and we didn't stop until we developed it. And we have developed it by far. We've 10-folded the business that we ever did with them. And they're still lovely people. It's nothing bad.
Did your relationship sever?
It never severed 100%, but it definitely, we didn't we weren't best friends by any
Yeah,
means.
like
And
you're not calling to talk about the last episode of the
yeah,
Desperate Housewives, right? Is that
and
show still on? I don't think that show's still on, but
it's
nonetheless.
hard for someone who had been in the business 25 years to give the rein up and watch someone else take over without feeling, it was almost like I felt like they wanted us to succeed because I carried her legacy, right? But
Mhm.
at the same time, maybe not be as successful as she was.
You know,
And
I've asked myself this question of when somebody leaves you, let's say you have a team member that has been with you for 5, 6, 7 years. When they leave you, do you wish their success so you can look back and say, look at my fingerprints, look what I got to do? Or do you wish them to stumble and fail so you say, boy, they really needed me and I was really valuable? Like, what's your instinct on that? What do you think she wanted for you? And what do you want for the people that leave you?
I think for the people that leave me, it depends on how they leave you.
Mm.
You know,
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
if they're graceful and they're professional, and I never want to hold somebody back. If they can do better without me and they're adult enough to come and say, "Look, this is what I want to do,"
Yeah.
then I totally 100% support that.
Mhm.
If they pull a bunch of fast maneuvers, like often happens, then it's hard not to feel like, well, let's just see how they do. And we've had that happen. Ed had that happen, and it's not gone so well for those people, and that's okay. I don't wish them any ill will,
Mhm.
but I think a lot of how the departure and the separation, whether it's an "I love you and be successful" or "good luck" type of goodbye, is really truly how I've reacted to those kind of things.
And you felt like this previous owner was almost wishing you to fail, so she felt as though she was really important in the equation.
And I think she had very mixed emotions. I think she wanted us to succeed because she trained us, right? And
Yep.
she's the
Yep.
one. So there was investment there. But at the same time, she had always been number one, and she was so competitive, like the
Mm,
probably one of the most competitive people I've ever worked with.
yeah.
And I think that there was a little bit of secret, you know, thought of they probably aren't going to succeed. But that
Well,
has
so
not,
I
and
mean,
I,
it wasn't a secret. She told you weren't going to
yeah,
succeed.
yeah, this is
there
true.
was
It
there was
was
no secret to that.
at a conference table. I'll never forget the moment.
Oh,
And
in front of other people.
just Ed and I, they pulled us in and said, look, we're getting ready to depart, and we just don't think you guys are going to make it.
Was her financial future dependent on you making it, or was the buyout that you arranged not tied to the production that you were doing
I
as
think
like a slow
some
buyout?
of both, honestly, Eric. I think could they have lived without it? Maybe they could have lived without it. We were one of the very first teams, for sure, in Alaska that had ever done this.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of like, we'll see what happens. I think it was a little bit of both, honestly. I think that they could have made it without us, but they made it a lot better with us.
Okay, I'm trying to force an answer here. I want to be really clear on this question. Uh, if you were to do it all over again, and you can't give me the response of, well, everything happens for a reason, and I learned lessons from it, so it was regardless, it was the right choice. If you were faced with a similar decision today, Dar, to buy somebody's book of business for $750,000, or in today's money, $2 million, or whatever else it may be, would you do that same decision again, or would you pave another path?
Um, this meaning the same business that we're in, like another real estate, or would it
Yeah.
be any business?
Another real estate business, what we know best.
I would only do it if it totally made financial sense, and we're much more savvy financially now than
Okay.
we were back then. Would I, and the other piece would be that it would have to be local. I would not do another Fairbanks.
Mhm.
Um,
And
uh,
you're in Anchorage, everybody. Dara's in
yeah,
Anchorage. The business that she bought later on is in Fairbanks.
yeah.
Mhm.
So Ed runs the Fairbanks business and I run the Anchorage business. And I would not do that at our age, a big distance like this, because
Mhm.
Ed has had some health issues over the last 3 years, and it's really played a toll on his health, just the traveling.
Mhm.
Even though he flies up on Monday and he comes back on Thursday. We have the
How
property
far is Fairbanks from Alaska or from
300
Anchorage? Excuse me.
350 miles.
Okay. But
So
flight wise, that's an hour.
an hour,
Okay.
45 minutes an hour. But you're at the airport for an hour and a half before. So it's not just an hour. If you could just walk onto the plane, it would be probably not nearly as dreadful as it is when you're going every single
Mhm.
week. And I understand how he feels because that's how I felt when I worked for the marketing company.
Of course. Of course.
So I would do it locally if it makes sense
Okay.
financially. And I've had several people try to sell me their business and it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
financially. They didn't have a business to sell.
So was the value in the database, or was the value in the slow buyout and the handoff? Like what was worth the $750,000?
The data was the value was in the database and the fact that I worked 7 years with her. So I was her sidekick. And
Okay.
when she slid out, they just called me. I mean, it was a natural progression. Do I recommend somebody work with your partners that you're buying out for 7 years? Not only no, but hell no. But but it worked out very well for us. And
Had you not bought the business and instead just said, I'm going to find my own way, would you have propelled forward faster?
um I would say probably not
Okay.
because Carol had such a following in town. Me
Mhm.
being in her shadow was hugely helpful.
Mm,
Um, but I mean, you have to be good to keep that going, right? You
right.
can't just, live off of her and then not do the things that I was taught to do. She taught me to be a warrior in this business, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it
Yeah.
wasn't for her training.
So valuable, but if you were to do it all over again, you certainly would analyze things differently with some learned
Yes.
lessons.
Financially, time involved with the other person staying in the business and stuff like that. It's difficult to go into a business you've purchased, even in our Fairbanks business, and kind of root the other person out so you can do what you want to do because it's your business, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do that and still remain, business partners or, of some sort.
Uh, to our friends listening, Dar, I don't know if they're catching the same theme I am, but the word perspective comes up once again. Uh, you went through a business decision, right, wrong, or indifferent. You learned a ton of lessons from it. You came and did it a second time. The mistake you did it the second time was that you were in different locations, but you found a way to make it work, albeit stressful. Are there any other unique perspectives that you have uh, in terms of buying another business and merging things together?
Eric, if Ed and I bought this business 20 years ago in Fairbanks, I think it would not be so much of a hardship. But I'm 63 and Ed is 62. And it's like at some point you kind of want to slow down. And we bought that. We've owned it now 6 years, I think it is. And so I think that, and with his health issues, it's become very apparent to me that if something happens to him, guess where I'm going? And
Mm.
he showed me a little thing on his phone that one of his agents sent him, and it was minus 52 degrees this weekend up there. And I tell him, if something happens to you, I'm not doing Fairbanks. I'm just over. I can't do this. I'm not doing 52 below. So it's been bad enough. It's been 20 below here in Anchorage.
Oh my
So
gosh. Uh,
anyway,
so I think there's a little narrative here about uh, when you do have something, you need a key who to run it. Right now, the key who is Ed. But the
mhm,
issue is if something goes wrong with Ed, and there is something going wrong health wise with Ed right now,
mhm,
that falls on you, and that's a stressor and an oh crap. But you also had a giant oh crap fall on you in the last couple of years that has rocked you and your world in such a profound way. And I know this is rooted with a lot of emotions and other things, but I've heard you tell the story publicly, and I felt like this was maybe a safe place where you could share what happened and some of the things that you've gone through and the things that you can share that would be gifts to us.
yes. So September 21st, 2019, my son, Christopher, who was 33 years old, my number one agent on the team, powerhouse, doing great, died of an accidental drug overdose. And we had problems with Chris when he was young. It started at about the age of 14. And this was also another reason why I decided the traveling had to slow down, just because I needed
You had said Christopher was the one that had the hardship with your dog passing, right? But there were
Yes.
other things happening in his life where it was a bumpy road.
He got involved with, the stuff that teenagers do, right? First it starts out with alcohol, then they're smoking pot, and Alaska's got pot stores on every corner here in town, but that was before the pot store days. And then his age group actually kind of got caught in that oxycodone time frame of, and I'm trying to think of the name, dope sick, or no, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of the program. Anyway, it's got 8 different series. It's a series of 8, and it talks about the manufacturers and how they were pushing these drugs, Oxycontin, and how it wasn't, addictive, and how the prescriptions just kept getting higher and higher. Well, his age group, I can't even tell you how many kids out of his class have died from drug overdoses. And it's excessive. And that was that time frame that all of this was going on. And they actually in Chris graduated in 2005, so it started, his was probably 2000-ish time frame, but they predicted that there was going to be an epidemic that's coming down the road, and that's exactly where we are today. Anyway, he struggling with addiction. He became oxycodone is in about 10 days you're addicted to it. And it didn't stop there. And we battled through multiple rehab facilities with him. We had to ship him out because Alaska didn't have anything that could facilitate him. As a mother, I remember a day laying on the bedroom floor in a fetal position thinking my son was going to die, and I couldn't get him help. And I didn't know how to get him help. There just wasn't anything here in Alaska. And so we sent him out, and he got clean. The average heroin addict relapses, or I should say not heroin, but opiate. So what happens is they start taking the prescription drugs, and then they can't afford them anymore. Then it goes to heroin because heroin's cheap, right? And then from heroin, now it's one step further, which thank God wasn't the issue when Chris died, what is now the fentanyl that we're all dealing with across the nation. It's cheap. And so that's how that gets started. And he finally got clean he was probably 26, 33, 35. Yeah, he's probably
so you went through 12-ish years of addiction and hardships, right? Like half of his life.
The worst time of my life were those 12 years. Even worse than now. I just have to deal with things differently now. Then every day you sat and waited for the phone call to come in that they were dead. And you just knew as a parent one day you were going to get that call. And we battled with it, and it was up and down. He'd be doing okay, and then they relapse. They relapse. An opiate addiction, somebody's got an opiate addiction, the average, I think, is 8 to 11 times that they relapse. And they either get better, they go to jail, or they die. Those are the 3 things. They rehab, death.
Did you think better was ever in his future?
Yeah, I did. And it was. And he had been clean 5 or 6 years. And we brought him, he lived in Hawaii with my older son. And then that's where he met Sasha, his wife. And I'm so thankful for God for the last 5 to 6 years I got to spend with my son, because before then he was a shit. And literally, I mean, you'd come home and your stuff would be missing because they can't afford the drugs. So they hawk everything. They take it to the pawn shop. They do. I mean, I can't tell you how many times We had to go back and get jewelry. You'd think you have it hid, put away, and they'd get to it somehow. I mean, it's just this horrible circle that you get into as a parent. And then you think you're losing it, your head, because you've misplaced something, but no, really it's at the pawn shop and you just don't realize it. So we went through that for a very long period of time. Once he got clean, he was an amazing kid. And like I said, I'm so thankful for the last 6 years I had with my son, because it was some of the best times of our lives as a family. And to have him back and have him be a part of the family, and um, he was a rock star in the business. His clients loved him. I mean, I can't, still to the day, I can't tell you, 4 years, almost, well, heading on 4.5 years now, how many clients still contact me. And I just had somebody put something on Facebook about him yesterday. Um, I think when he finally got clean and sober, he realized all the wrongs that he had done, that every addict does. And he really tried to make up for those things. And I would have, after he died, we'd have people come up and say, I don't know if you know this, but Christopher loaned me money to help me get a car, or he bought me, we were in Hawaii and one of his friends, who had also been an addict, was in jail. He said, Christopher picked me up when I got out of jail, and he bought me a phone so that he could communicate with me and help me stay clean. And I mean, it's just one thing after another, which is why we do the pay it forward cards that we have. And so when this happened, it was just totally out of unexpected.
Did you know that he was using again?
No, he wasn't using, but he relapsed.
Okay.
One time, and
It was
killed him.
one relapse that took him.
Well, yeah. It was laced, of course, we didn't know this until we get all the toxicology reports back. It was laced with 3.5 times the lethal dose of methamphetamines. He was a heroin user, 2 different drugs. Meth is a take me up drug, and heroin is a take me down drug. He didn't obviously know that. He died instantly of a heart attack, is what it did.
Oh my gosh.
And so we were, his wife was at a, go ahead.
Do you know why he relapsed? Like what situation was he in?
Well, the problem with opiate addiction is there is a chemical residual that remains in the brain, and they can be watching something on television and it can trigger the brain and they start craving it. And that's the only thing that we know. We don't know. He was home by himself. We had all been to our house in Lake Havasu for a week. We were surfing down there with some friends of ours, and his wife had gone to a retreat for the weekend, and we were on our way home from Havasu. I actually found out that he was dead by text on an airplane.
Oh no.
And if you ever wanted to, as close as I wanted to jump out the door. I just really wanted to jump off the door. And I fell to the floor in the middle of the airplane. We were in first class, and the flight attendants picked me up, put me in the jump seat, and my daughter found him. So she's texting me like a crazy person, Mom, I need to call you. I need to talk with you. And I couldn't call because I was on an airplane. And I asked if there was any way we could talk. And they said, no, it's only, they can't do that. And so we had to wait. We were 2.5 hours out of Alaska when this happened. So we got home and had to deal with all of that. And then we had to decide as a family, did we come public with this? Do we sweep it under the rug?
Had you previous to all this, had you been public about his addiction, or had he been, or was this like hidden dark secret that was so riddled in shame and embarrassment and weights and all that?
He also was a very humble kid, and he was very, very embarrassed by his addiction. So only
were you embarrassed by his addiction, Star?
When he was a bad kid, yes.
Okay.
When he was in the heat of it, not after. Seeing the progress he made and the person
did you blame yourself?
Sure you do as a parent. it's like, what could I have done better? I shouldn't have worked for the marketing company. I shouldn't have been on the road 150 days a year. What could we have done differently? We should have paid attention to the signs. I don't think, Eric, if a child dies, that there isn't a parent that doesn't question
Yeah.
what they did wrong or how they could have done better.
Do you still think you did wrong and you could have done better?
I think we could have done better as parents. I mean, Chris, you had to understand, Chris was 13 days late being delivered. I looked like a baby elephant by the time I had the child. He came out screaming. He never stopped from that point forward. He was the squeaky wheel of the house all the time. He commanded the attention like our other two children never did. He was always 10 feet ahead of us, no matter what. He's very smart. And could we have done things differently? Yes, of course, you can always do things differently. Do I blame us? I don't know that I blame us. I just wish we were smarter and more educated about drugs when he was younger, because there was a lot of signs that we were oblivious to,
Mm.
that we had no clue what those things meant, that we kept finding. So, um, you
Yeah,
know,
no, I don't know if naivety is a sin.
yeah, I mean, I just never, out of my three kids, I never would have expected that out of him, to be honest with you.
Hmm. Uh, you've probably replayed scenarios in your head 1,000 times over. Are you haunted or are you comforted right now?
Boy, that's a tough one, Eric. I said my worst days of my lives were those 14 years or whatever it was
Mhm.
that I worried nonstop about him. And Christopher was a mama's boy, and Ed and I parent very differently. And I think that's what we could have done better. It wasn't until he overdosed in our bathroom that Ed really realized that he was enabling him to do these kind of things, because he would give him money all the time, things like that. So we weren't on the same sheet of music, and that's what we could have done as parents. I think, am I haunted to some extent because I see him laying on his bedroom floor? And my daughter has had to deal with that because he was dead about 16 hours before we found him.
Hmm.
And he was laying on his face, and he was black and blue because the blood pools when somebody dies. And my daughter's had to deal with this, and she's still to the day goes and sees a counselor. Um, it's been tough. Uh, it's been tough on the family, but it's been tough on my office too,
Mhm.
because we're a family ran team. There were 6 of us here that were involved in it, but then all of my agents here are millennials, and they all went to school with Christopher. They were all good friends, and it wasn't just a home situation, a personal situation, it also became a work situation.
Yeah,
So often when you're going through personal stuff, people go to work, right? Because they need to get it off their brain. But at the same time,
there was no escaping.
there was no escaping in it.
Hmm. So, I mean, I asked you a pretty direct question: is are you haunted or are you comforted? Um,
Sorry.
and no, I bring that up because your world intersects, right? Work and home, it's all Walden life.
Mhm,
And so, how have you found comfort? I know that it's not crystal clear right now that everything is as good as it needs to be.
mhm.
But how have you found comfort?
Um, so I'm haunted by the visions that I see, but the comfort has come from, sadly, the constant worry you have as a parent, as a mother that I had. Even though Chris had been clean, if he disappeared and I couldn't find him, I would get this pit in my stomach that would take me back to the days when he was really bad. So there's comfort in the fact that I don't have to deal with that anymore. So I say that's sad comfort.
Mhm.
And I think
It's almost relief, right? I
yeah.
think of somebody with an ailing parent,
Mhm,
and you don't want them to die because you love them so much. But when they're gone, there's this relief, like, okay,
Exactly.
there's a little bit of breathing room. Like
100%.
if it almost feels gross, doesn't it, Dara, to
Yeah.
say like that burden is now off of you. Like, I don't take your son Christopher as a burden, but
Yeah.
obviously you don't have that nagging worry. There's a nagging guilt now, probably, but the worry is less. Did I hear that
So the
correctly?
Yes, 100%. That's exactly what it is. That worry is gone. The comfort that we've gotten is through developing the Christopher Walden House of Hope, which is a nonprofit that we developed after Christopher died. Some very good friends of ours, a month, 2 months after Christopher died, took us to dinner and said, "What are we going to do?" And I at that point I couldn't think big. I didn't know how to think big. We were so in our own head still from the loss and dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. And I said, maybe we'll do some scholarships and pay for some young kids getting into real estate, whatever. And they looked at me and they're like, no, we're not. We're not doing that. Christopher's personality was way bigger than that. And Christopher actually had wanted to eventually open a rehab facility. And I always thought if we did, I never shared this with him. I said we'd want to name it the Christopher Walden House Hope because there's hope there. And no parent should ever give up on their child, no matter how bad things are. Never give up on your child. And so I shared that, and that's how it got started one night over dinner. And so we've been a nonprofit now for three and a half, well, March, 4 years now, 4 years. And we have made amazing progress. I've had some people that work in the nonprofit world say they've never seen something develop like it has. We have now opened up our first Christopher Walden House of Hope last September. We partner with rehab facilities and companies. We don't do the rehab, we're brick and mortar. And we have created 36 additional beds in the state of Alaska at that facility. And we just, right before Christmas, granted money to help another facility open up in Fairbanks, and that's another 22 beds. And those are, what is that? That's 58 lives that hopefully we're saving every single day. And I probably get 2 phone calls a month from a parent that needs help. And my job, I have no job, but my responsibility in my head is to connect them with the right places so they can get the help that we couldn't get.
Mm.
I never want to see a family go through the times that we went through.
Mm-hmm. Dar, you've made lemonade out of lemons, excuse me, but I know you'd just give anything to have Christopher back. And I want to say this as somebody who has a mom that's not here anymore and was tremendous, is regardless of the good days and the bad days, I always knew that my mom loved me. And I'm guessing Christopher always knew that you loved him. And so I don't know if you should have guilt and regret, although those things are so hard to keep at bay.
No,
I think that your boy knew that you were relentlessly pursuing him,
mhm.
and you should be really proud of that, Dar.
He definitely was a mama's boy, and his wife will tell you that.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest things he did for me, and it wasn't much before he died, he bought me a Rolex watch. And I said, I don't want a Rolex. I just want an Apple Watch. I need something that tells
Yeah.
me what my heartbeat is. Okay.
Yeah.
He's like, no, mom. He goes, you deserve a Rolex. He goes, I don't know anybody that's worked harder than you have, and you deserve a Rolex. And so today, here is my
Yeah.
Rolex that my son gave me. And it's one of the best things he ever did for me.
Yeah. Dar, I wish I didn't think of you as a podcast guest, because the hell you've gone through. I mean, you're still living in it every day. The weight that you're carrying doesn't get lighter. Time doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't get lighter. You've just gotten stronger. And for what it's worth, I'm really proud of the way in which you're taking this pain and turning it into gain for other people. It speaks well of your character.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I have to give credit, Eric, to my team too. And their support that they've held our hand through all of this. And we've held their hand through it. Without it all, we wouldn't have made it. Without our team and our friends, it would have been difficult.
Those of you listening, I don't know if you heard this, but Dar gave the credit and wore the cloak of responsibility. And that's the character of a really great leader. And so, Dar, I love you. I'm grateful for you. And I know that someone listening right now is either going through a similar thing or they have someone in their life that's going through a similar thing. So please do me a favor and forward this episode on. This is not for self-promotion. This is because I think that it would be a shame that Christopher's life and the lessons learned from it didn't become a gift in this next chapter. And so let's keep this gift moving forward. On behalf of Dar Walden, my name is Eric Hatch. This is the Redefined Podcast, and we'll catch you next time on the Flippity Flip. God bless.